Hey, thanks for watching this video. I just want to apologize ahead of time for being in a t-shirt. Um, I'm actually recording this episode on Labor Day because it's raining outside and there's nobody in the office and I can get a bunch of this kind of work done. So sorry for the Under Armour logo, but I still think this is going to be great content. Let me hit record for the radio and we're going to get started here. And welcome to this week's edition of the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Sechler Law Firm, where great families make great estate plans. My name is Tim Sechler, and I do this show each and every week to help you understand the things that could get in your way from having an effective estate plan, having a successful retirement. I am the owner of a law firm in Cranberry Township called the Sechler Law Firm. And what we do is really three types of cases. We do wills and trusts and estate plans, which is some of what we're going to be chatting about today. We also do post-death administration. If you've lost a loved one and need to go through that legal process, we do that. And we also do what we call nursing home crisis planning, which is when someone in your family or yourself ends up in a skilled nursing facility and you need to figure out how to protect assets because you're getting a $15,000 to $18,000 monthly bill. We help people through that difficult situation. And because we do those types of cases, in our office with our estate planning, we tend to talk to families about planning ahead for long-term care expenses rather than dealing with that emergency later. And if you think about it, depending on which study you read, 1 in 3 of us is likely to develop dementia. 1 in 3. That's according to the Alzheimer's Association. 1 in 3 of us is going to have dementia. And 2/3 of us are going to need some form of long-term care. And according to the state of Pennsylvania, today, the skilled nursing facility in Pennsylvania costs just about $15,000 a month. So the question is, well, if 1 in 3 of us are going to get sick with just dementia, not counting everything else, and then 2/3 of us are going to need some form of long-term care, in long-term care, today's dollars are $15,000 a month. What's it going to be in 20 years when I could actually need long-term care? And how much is that going to cost? And what is it that I can do to protect myself? And so we educate people on these issues all the time because people like to not think about this stuff. It's not fun to think about your ultimate disability, your ultimate passing away, what ailments you're going to deal with, what's going to happen with your finances if you get sick. But here at the Sechler Law Firm, we think about that stuff all day long. And so if anything that I mention in today's episode you find impactful, you find interesting for yourself, you should come to one of our upcoming workshops. You can find out all about the free workshops at sechlerlawfirm.com. That's SECHLER lawfirm.com. We do free workshops in our office and around the community, inviting people in to learn about the differences between wills and trusts and powers of attorney and how you can protect your stuff from long-term care expenses, and how Medicaid really works and all of these complicated rules, taxes and whatnot. So we do these workshops to give you the information you need to make good decisions. They're free of charge. And if you come to a workshop, I will offer you a free consultation where you can come in and talk to one of our folks about how the stuff that you learn at the workshop will apply in your family. So if you've been putting off getting an estate plan done, or if you haven't updated it since the kids were little and now the kids are adults, this is a good opportunity for you to come in and get some free education. So check it out at sechlerlawfirm.com. You can find our workshops tab, register for free, and come and spend about an hour to an hour and a half with us learning about this stuff. And I promise you we'll have a little fun. You'll learn a lot. And maybe this will even be the thing that gets you moving on doing an estate plan. Now, today, what I want to talk about on today's show is your house and what to do with the house. I talk about the house a lot on this show because for a lot of families, middle-class families, upper-middle-class families, the biggest asset that you own is your home. It's either the home or the retirement account. If we think about the home, most homeowners, if you've reached your retirement years and let's say the house is paid off or about to be paid off, or even if it's not about to be paid off, but you have some significant equity, most people are not going to sell that house to live on the money. Despite what you see, most people decide that doing like a reverse mortgage to access your equity to buy groceries is a mistake. Now, they make sense in some cases, but not in very many. And so most people are still going to own the home when they pass away, because they're not going to have accessed that equity for living expenses during their life. And so if I own a home, and that home, and let's say I have $250,000 home or $250,000 in equity in a home. Now would be true if it's a $70,000 home or $700,000 home. We have a bunch of home equity. What I really want to do is get this house to my kid, or at least get the value of these assets to my kid. And I would prefer not to lose it in the process. And so what are my options? What should I do? And I have come up with, in preparation for today's episode, 9 different reasons why you should consider owning your home in a trust. Now, before we get into the material, remember that this show is for your education and information. I'm not here giving you legal advice. I am not your attorney. I'd happy to be your attorney, but you need to give us a call first and retain us, which you can do anytime at 724-546-4227. But for today's purposes, don't make any decisions based on what you hear in this or any other radio show. We do this stuff to provide you education and information to help move you toward making a good decision. This show is not intended to give you all the information you would need to make a decision, because everybody's different, right? But for folks who are retirement years or about to be retirement years and are concerned about, well, what happens if we get sick? What happens in the event I need the nursing home? Do I get to keep the house? Does my spouse get to keep the house? Is my spouse going to have to move out and sell the home? What are we going to do? How can I make sure that my spouse has enough to live on? And how do we leave a legacy and get some stuff to the kids? And this particular issue is why I recommend holding the primary residence in a trust. We're going to walk through the 9 different reasons that I think holding your house in a trust is probably in your best interest. It's probably not all that risky for you. You should consider it. Now, before you get into this, understand that you're going to go to a lot of law firms who are going to tell you, no, you're not rich. All you need is a simple will, right? You've probably heard that before. All you need is a simple will. I couldn't tell you how much I disagree with that sentiment. That is not, in my opinion, a legal opinion. That is sort of a philosophical opinion about only wealthy people need to use trust. Well, wealthy people do need to use trusts, but wealthy people are typically doing trusts to avoid big death taxes or other types of taxes, which we middle-class folks don't necessarily need to worry about. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't use a trust. There's lots of different types of trusts. And so I'm going to go through a couple of them. And I think that these things are pretty interesting. But if you do, you can come to one of our workshops and learn more about it. Number 1 is, in a trust, if you put your house into a trust, you can still maintain control. See, a lot of people think that, like, if I do this trust, the bank's going to be involved, or the kids are going to be all involved, or I've got to have a trustee to manage this thing. You can do a trust and still be involved in the control element of the trust. So number 1 is, putting your house in a trust does not mean you give up control. If you want to refinance, that's still your decision. If you want to sell it, that's still your decision. If you want to improve it, home renovations, that's still your decision. So you can have a trust and still maintain control. One of the reasons that people do trusts is to avoid probate. You've probably heard me or some other advisor or some other lawyer talking about avoiding probate. And avoiding probate is a great idea. Listen, you spent your entire life trying to stay out of legal trouble, trying to stay out of the courthouse, trying to be private. And so then when you ultimately pass away, why would you want all your legal affairs, your financial affairs, your kids having to be involved in a court system in order to get an inheritance? Because that's the default. If you have your house in your own name and it's going to go through your will, the will is an admission ticket to probate court. But what happens is most people will take and put all of their accounts with, like, beneficiary designations. Your retirement account, if you have an IRA or a 401k, for example, that has a beneficiary designation on it. When you pass away, you've told the financial institution where to send the money, right? So most of your financial assets, if you really think about it, probably have beneficiary designations on it, which means that they're going to avoid probate. So then the only major asset that ends up going through probate is the primary residence. And if your primary residence is worth a few $100,000, why pay the expense of hiring a lawyer and doing all of this to go through the probate process? Just avoid probate. So number 1, maintain control. Number 2, avoid probate. Number 3, And I'm going to do a couple before we get into like the long-term care planning elements of this, because I talk about that all the time. But a third reason to consider protecting assets from the nursing home is you can protect your money or your house from your kids' potential issues. Okay, so let me walk through two scenarios where this matters. One is a lot of people in retirement years will put their house in their kid's name. And they've done this because they think it's smart from some tax perspective, which it's probably not. And they think it's smart from a long-term care planning perspective, and it's probably not. But by using a trust instead, you don't put the assets subject to your kids' issues. So, for example, if I put my house in my daughter's name, uh, which is kind of funny to think about because currently she's 6 years old, but when she's an adult, and if I put my house into my daughter's name and she goes through a divorce, well, then what happens with that house? Where am I supposed to live? What happens? Is that thing going to need to be sold and split? And so there's the divorce. There's also the issue of if I put my house in my kid's name, what happens if my kid dies before me? What does her will say? Well, her will probably leaves everything to her husband. Well, now I'm living in a house owned by my former son-in-law. What happens when he remarries? What's his new wife think about me in that house? And so, listen, one of the biggest issues is it's a great way to protect your house while protecting it from your kids' potential issues too. And this also matters after you've passed away. I had somebody very recently ask me, they go through this thing where it's like when we're chatting with new clients, we're getting to know them, we're getting to know about their family, we're getting to know about their money. Often, somebody will say, well, my kids are great, my daughter this and that, and we love her and everything's going well, but then she married this guy. And whenever I hear a client refer to their son-in-law as this guy, what I know is what they're going to ask me next is what happens if this marriage doesn't relate. The people who enjoy their son-in-law, they usually use the person's first name rather than saying my daughter married this guy, right? And so what they're saying is my daughter married this guy, and let's say I pass away and I leave my daughter an inheritance, and then my daughter wakes up one day and realizes she married a loser and she divorces this guy. Is that guy gonna get all the money I worked hard for? And we use trusts to protect the inheritance from that potential issue. And so that's another reason why perhaps we should consider holding your house in its equity value, holding the home in a trust to protect it from the kids' potential issues. Another is, it is generally speaking, we can do some things to come up with the most tax savvy answer for your scenario. Sometimes we want to design a trust in a way that will help you avoid Pennsylvania's inheritance tax. Pennsylvania's inheritance tax, if you're leaving money to the kids, is 4.5%. So if you have a $300,000 home times 4.5%, we're talking about what, $13,500, which we can avoid that tax in some situations. In other situations, we want to leave the money subject to Pennsylvania's inheritance tax because we want to be savvy about another type of tax called the capital gains tax. And so when we're designing a trust to own your house, we can do different things with what that trust says that have different implications in the law and the taxability of the thing. And so with a trust, we can help come up with the most tax savvy answer for how to leave the assets to your kids, depending on your unique situation. So, doing a little recap here, we've talked about maintaining control. We talked about avoiding probate. We talked about protecting it from your kids' divorces, either before or after you pass away. We've talked about being tax savvy with regard to how we leave this valuable asset to your kids. And if you want to learn more about this stuff, you should attend one of our upcoming workshops. The workshops are usually done by me personally. I talk to you about all of the pros and cons of these different things. You can ask me questions. We do these things several times a month. You can find out more about our upcoming workshops at sechlerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com. And while you're there, go ahead and download one of our guides. We have a couple of guides on there, one about the 9 common estate planning mistakes to avoid. We talk about there's also a guide on the website for Medicaid qualification planning, just giving you information. then you can check out our video page on our website where all of the previous episodes of the show or YouTube videos that I've done, you can access them right there on the website. So all I do, not all I do, but a lot of what I do is prepare this kind of content to try to help people make good decisions with regard to their family. And we put it all on the website. So use the website as your resource for helping to figure out what you want to do. The website is sechlerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com. Or if you're ready to just get in and chat with somebody, give us a call at 724-546-4227. Okay, now I want to get into the long-term care planning reasons why you might want to hold your house in a trust. And I'll give you a couple of different reasons why this can make some sense for you. But one is given the right type of trust. Now, if you have an existing trust and it's a living trust or revocable living trust, it's probably not what I'm about to talk about. But we can design your trust to be a thing called a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, which will protect the value of your home in the event you ever end up in a nursing home, which, heck, let's just face it, a lot of us will. And so we can protect our house from the nursing home by holding it in a trust. And then after 5 years, that house is no longer subject to the Medicaid rules, which means we just might have protected a couple of $100,000 asset from those harsh rules. So we can use trusts to protect your assets from things like long-term care expense while remember the number one thing we talked about, you can maintain control. So you don't have to put your house in your kid's name. It's a smarter idea most of the time to put your house into a trust because you get to still maintain control of the house, but now we've protected it from the nursing home. The other nursing home issue to think about is when someone goes to the nursing home, technically speaking, for a single person, the home is not counted from an eligibility standpoint. Now, the problem is it becomes very difficult for the family to keep the house because the nursing home and the Medicaid rules take all the other assets, right? So I don't have any other money. I don't have any income, but I've got this house I'm allowed to keep. But is that really work? I mean, who's going to pay the property taxes and the utilities? And oftentimes that house has to be sold or the kids want to foot the bill or whatever. But here's the problem. If you've gone on Medicaid and they didn't count the house and somehow you've managed to keep the house until you pass away, when you pass away, that house is subject to what's called Pennsylvania's estate recovery claim. The estate recovery claim means that the house needs to be sold and the money, the sales proceeds, given to the state of Pennsylvania for every penny they spent on your care. So if they didn't take the house while you're alive, they will absolutely take the house when you pass away if they've been paying for your care. And so now what's interesting in Pennsylvania is that estate recovery claim, how they come after your house after you pass away. The estate recovery claim is limited to your probate estate. So remember, the second reason I told you to consider using a trust to own your home was we get to avoid probate. And sometimes that's about saving some money and keeping things private and keeping the headache down for your kids. But the biggest reason I want to help you avoid probate is because when you pass away, anything that goes through probate, which if you don't have your house in a trust will be your house, is subject to Medicaid's claim when you pass away. And so we avoid probate, not necessarily for the sake of avoiding probate, but we avoid probate for the sake of avoiding the nursing home claim when you pass away. And for that matter, general creditor claims, final medical bills, lawsuits, other general creditors that could come after you when you pass away. Having your house in the trust can protect the value of the house from those issues and get them to your kids. Another reason that this could make some sense for Medicaid is if you do end up in a nursing home, we're often looking for things that we're allowed to do to spend your money. So in a married case, oftentimes the healthy spouse is allowed and able to keep the primary residence. So in a married case, the house might be safe. But you know, a thing that's not safe is the sick spouse's retirement account. So let's say you're in a situation where most of your net worth is in your primary residence and a retirement account. Well, if I have your house in a trust for 5 years, you don't own a house anymore. And then you end up in a nursing home, and we've still got an issue with this retirement account. And the healthy spouse calls me and says, well, look, he's in a nursing home. They don't count the house anymore because it's in a trust, but he's got this couple of $100,000 retirement account, and it's subject to the nursing home. Well, guess what? The healthy spouse is not allowed to own that retirement account, but the healthy spouse is allowed to own a home, but the healthy spouse doesn't own a home currently because the home is in a trust. What that allows us to do is go buy the spouse a home that she will now own in her own name, which will be the primary residence for Medicaid purposes. She'll move in there. And that will allow us to not only protect the value of your current home, but it will also allow us to protect the value of a second home later if we need it. Now, I know that's complicated, but I'm trying to make the point that there's a lot of benefit here in considering owning your home in a trust rather than in your own name or rather than in your kid's name, even for middle class Americans, because I have seen time and time again that holding your house in your own name is a mistake for nursing home reasons. Transferring the house to your kids is a mistake for a variety of reasons. Owning your home in a trust can be the smartest play to make sure that we keep a house for your kids, for your wife to live in or your spouse to live in, to make sure we leave a legacy for your children and be smart about taxes and control and the benefits. And the last thing I want to say about this, and this is either number 9 or 10, I've kind of lost track at this point, is nothing really changes. Trust, the word trust sounds all intimidating, and I know you don't fully understand what the heck I'm talking about, which is why we do the workshops. But if we put your house into a trust, you know what you still get the benefit of? Living in your house. Your house smells the same. It looks the same. The grass still needs mowed. The stuff still needs fixed. The taxes still need paid. But it's still the same home, and you still sleep there every night. And if you ever want to remodel it, you can. If you ever want to sell it, you can. And if you ever want to do anything, pretty much you can. And so people are intimidated because of the word trust. You ask 10 lawyers their opinions on trust, you get 10 different opinions. Here's mine. Don't let it intimidate you. You just need to learn about it, because I've outlined 9 or 10 different reasons why I think trust ownership of the primary residence can make a ton of sense for you. But the biggest thing I think that we need to just kind of recognize is that in doing so, you don't really give up all that much. You're still sleeping there. Kids are still inherit it. You can still renovate it. It's the same house. And so I would encourage you to become educated on some of these issues. And the way that you get educated on some of these issues is to come to one of our upcoming workshops, or if you would like, you can attend one of our upcoming video webinars, because we do it on a webinar too. And you can find out all about those by calling the law firm. Call the Sechler Law Firm at 724-546-4227. Again, 724-546-4227, or come to our website at sechlerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com. And you can cruise. You can use the resources, the downloadable guides, the videos that we offer. You can find old episodes of the podcast. You can register to come for one of our upcoming live workshops, or if you want to just call and get a consultation, you can do that. You can find the phone number at sechlerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com, or in case you're driving, or if you're sitting there with a pen in your hand, 724-546-4227, and we'll get you the information you need in order to set your family up for success. So I hope you found these 9 reasons why you might want to hold your house in a trust to be beneficial to you. Now, let me answer 1 or 2 more questions that people often have about holding your house in a trust. One of the concerns is, can I transfer my house to a trust even though I've got a mortgage? And the answer is, under federal law, yes, you can. It depends on the type of trust, and it depends how the thing is worded. But don't let the fact that you have a mortgage prevent you from doing good planning for your family, because you might have a mortgage that's relatively small in comparison to the value of the house, and there's still significant home equity that is worth protecting. So the answer is yes, you can protect your house in a trust. Another question is, well, can I refinance later? The answer is yes, you can refinance. There's banks that will work with you even if you have a house in an irrevocable trust or revocable trust. So you're not giving up that restriction. Now, the question would be, what are you going to do with those funds? And that's something we can talk more about. But yes, you can still do that. You can still sell the house. You can still put the house in subject to a mortgage. And some people want to know like the tax ramifications of putting your house in the trust. And again, that depends on the type of trust. So there are lots of different varieties of trust, and the answer is which one makes sense for you is a factual analysis that the lawyers will do with you when we meet you, to figure out, you know what, based on what you're telling me, based on how you own the house, how long you've owned the house, what it's worth, I think that this type of thing makes sense. This type of trust or that type of trust, or a will, if that's what we find out makes sense. But often with primary residence, if there's some equity there, you got to consider trust ownership of the primary residence. I've seen it time and time again protect hundreds of thousands of dollars in home equity. And it really, to me, doesn't make any sense to leave all of that home equity exposed to the nursing home issue, if by putting it into a trust, we've resolved that problem without really sacrificing anything. So that's just for your consideration. Check us out at SechlerLawFirm.com. Remember, don't make any decisions based on this or any other radio show. If you need some help, give us a call. Look us up at SechlerLawFirm.com. I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you here again next week. Thanks. And thank you guys for watching. Have a great week.